Concord's about where you heard the beeps.
The beeping sound. There's something shifting in the car.
I don't know.
Oh.
It was at this moment, beeping, when your memory returned. It's a time previous to this that you can't remember.
The following story is based on the records of the United States Air Force, the files of the Hayden Planetarium, and the actual transcripts of the tapes made by Betty and Barney Hill under hypnosis by Dr. Benjamin Simon. The purpose? To penetrate an extraordinary case of double amnesia, precipitated by their claimed sighting of a UFO in 1961.
Our examinations are very much similar in that with both Barney and I, they checked our eyes, ears, nose, throat. He said it was a pregnancy test, and I said, well, that's no pregnancy test here.
Betty Hill was right. In 1961, there was no pregnancy test like that here on Earth.
What kind of man are you at all that doesn't believe in the little people?
I am the arm. And I sabotage this.
Dr. Jacques Vallée, international authority on the UFO experience.
I believe there's a quote from Vallée where he talks about if otherworldly beings or if aliens arrived and it was just a flying saucer, he would be severely disappointed because that's probably the most boring outcome one can think of. Vallée had a theoretical change, a shift in 1969 where he started moving away from otherworldly extraterrestrial entities, or his understanding of visitations and abductions and sightings. Probably, I think Vallée himself would say we can't comprehend the scientific workings of what's going on here, but it's not as simple as flying saucers from Mars. He also began exploring a lot of commonalities between UFOs and cults and new religious movements and so on and so forth. His split from Spielberg was that Spielberg was still working in a very sort of conventional little men and flying saucers way, which Vallée did not feel was accurate. Vallée said, I think it was an interview, that he argued with Spielberg on the subject, said the subject would be more interesting if it wasn't extraterrestrials. It was real, physical, what was found, but not ET. To which Spielberg replied, "You're probably right, but that's not what the public is expecting. This is Hollywood, and I want to give people something that's close to what they expect." Spielberg, as it is Hollywood, even back in the Golden Age, or the American Golden Age, New Golden Age, he just, he didn't have the balls to do it.
So I was terrified.
If you're considering something like Darby O'Gill and the Little People, and the narrative of Close Encounters, or other narratives of abduction and this taking of a human being to this other place, certainly there could be an argument made for the fact that, let's take for instance old Irish or Celtic legends of the Sidhe, the fairy. It was not the fairies that most people think of these days. These were pre-human civilizations that existed or were banished, depending on who you're talking to. This certainly could be something that was a primitive human way of describing what we know now as abduction phenomenon. That abduction narrative, be it in classical myth or be it Betty and Barney Hill, certainly share some similarities in many specifics, if not general ways. Kenneth Anger, you know, historically, he's the person who wrote Hollywood Babylon. He's a historian and he's a filmmaker, avant-garde filmmaker, very, very interested in the occult, very interested specifically in thelemic occult practices, and he tried to incorporate a lot of the symbols, symbology, and myth into his pieces itself, into his films. He's most famous probably for Scorpio Rising and Lucifer Rising, among other films. Still going strong today. What I heard is that Kenneth Anger talked about how Close Encounters ripped off Scorpio Rising, and that he in fact, in Lucifer Rising, and that he went to go see it multiple times to really determine whether or not it did rip off some of his core ideas. I guess there was a short review of the film that he wrote at one point, and he says that there's some burst of static that comes through in the traffic control tower in Close Encounters where you can hear it and it says Kananga or something like that, and he thinks that was him being taunted by Spielberg. If you look at his film Rabbit's Moon, there is more of a broad thematic connection with Close Encounters, in that both of them are about sort of an archetypal longing of humankind to be connected with something that is cosmological and beyond them. If you think of the UFOs in the Lucifer and Scorpio films, they are attracted to these monolithic sites. That's something which I think is probably more interesting than anything else, is this idea of UFOs and their correlation to monolithic sites as some sort of radar, be that the UFOs in Devil's Tower or the pyramids, but I definitely think there's some sort of correlation there that one could read into and think more about.
Mount Shaw. There is an apparent sacrificial stone on top of the hill that is virtually identical to the one at Mystery Hill downstate. There are those who believe that this was the site used by the English magician Aleister Crowley for the New Hampshire magical retreat of 1918 that he mentions in his Confessions. He gives the name of the spot as Lake Pasquaney, but there is no such place in the state, and the assumption is that he meant Lake Winnipesaukee, which is near here. Sacrifice on Mount Shaw, from Curious New England. If you like treasure hunts and are prepared for a wild goose chase, this may be of interest. On the Moultonborough side of Mount Shaw, there is a stone relic, facing west so the sun hits it, said to be identical to the sacrificial stone at America's Stonehenge. One theory is that it, and others yet undiscovered, were carved by pilgrim Carthaginians who, like the English Puritan separatists 2,000 years later, sought the New World to pursue religious freedom. In the Carthaginians' case, freedom to sacrifice the occasional human. Nice. I don't know. I mean, the Interstate 93 connection is probably going to be.
93 wasn't even defined, man. It was Route 3.
All right.
We made it down to Necronomicon 2013 in Providence, Rhode Island, near the beautiful Biltmore Hotel. Actually, the convention is split up between the Providence Hotel and Biltmore Hotel. Just so many people, they just have to split it up. Just so massive an event. I just came back from a session in which S.D. Joshi was in it, a gentleman named Donovan Lux. Some interesting information came out, especially from Donovan Lux, who was talking about the geography of where HP Lovecraft traveled and how that kind of got back into some of his fiction. In fact, I have confirmed from that session, now looking up some of the information and documents, that Lovecraft was absolutely in Vermont in 1927, 1928. Undoubtedly, he was also in New Hampshire around the same time.
What we're doing here this weekend, or this Sunday, is we're catching the last day of the Necronomicon convention, Necronomicon, if you will, Necronomicon. you know, we obviously have an interest in Lovecraft as it pertains to his trip in 1928, the summer of 1928. A really prolific period for him. He was writing Whisper in Darkness, he was writing the Dunwich Horror, the Jim Brandon entry in Weird America. It sort of points out some sort of correlate between possibly Aleister Crowley and Lovecraft visiting this one site in New Hampshire, Mount Shaw. So Kyle thinks I'm making some leaps, trying to figure out how to connect the Betty and Barney Hill abduction with HP Lovecraft and Aleister Crowley. Crowley, I don't think will be a problem. However, Lovecraft, he died 1937. As you can see over here, there's a plaque commemorating this gate. Lovecraft obviously was very obsessed with gates. We'll just point out that that Theodore Francis Green, who is commemorated by this gate, was senator from 1937 to 1961, the date of H.P. Lovecraft's death to the date of the Betty and Barney Hill abduction. Yes, it is a stretch.
So he was obviously removed from office because of the abduction. We're right now in front of the Fleur-de-Lis house, which is where one of the characters in Call of Cthulhu was proposed to reside, or at least this is the location that lent its historical relevance to that character.
And what's this behind us?
Behind us is the first Baptist church in the U.S. that was created in America, and it was founded by Roger Williams.
And did Lovecraft respect Roger Williams?
The thought was, again, learning from the convention, is that Roger Williams was one such outcast from the Puritans. They just kicked him out of Massachusetts because he was actually a little too tolerant. Came down here to create the colony of Rhode Island, created the first Baptist church. He himself was associated with the Baptist church. And to try and create a place of enlightenment. So absolutely, Lovecraft really respected that. Really, that resonated with him as an area of enlightenment, as compared to an area of darkness, Massachusetts, where they're thinking about witchcraft and all of the occult. Again, really interesting in how he thinks so highly of that, and yet all of his works are about the occult. So, an interesting guy.
Just to paraphrase something that S.D. Joshi said at the Necronomicon today, Lovecraft, he loved places, he loved topography. People, not so much, you know, people in mass is an abstract idea, not so much, but places and topography, that's what inspired him. And, you know, I guess that's the thrust of what we're sort of investigating here is the influence of Rhode Island, of Providence, Boston, area Marblehead in Massachusetts, places up and down the East Coast.
You get anything with that glare?
Yeah, it's nice. It's wonderfully
overexposed.
Yeah. Just to start way back at the beginning, all the way back at the beginning, this all came about because, you know, we wanted to do a trip in New England. I was looking at the entry on New Hampshire, this referring back to Jim Brandon's book, Weird America. There were really only two passages, Mystery Hill and Mount Shaw in the Lake Winnipesaukee area, near Castle in the Clouds. Mystery Hill is a no-brainer. Mystery Hill is a great site, very interesting. Brandon calls it the weirdest. Mount Shaw is much more obscure to the point that Brandon's reference in the book is might be completely incorrect, because it's not clear whether or not Crowley ever visited a Mount Shaw. Just to be clear, the speculation is that there is a sacrificial table on the top of Mount Shaw, which is the highest point in the Lake Winnipesaukee area. You know, obviously Mount Washington is the highest point on the eastern seaboard. The sacrificial table, Crowley performed experiments in the early 20th century. That was the conjecture by Brandon because of the mention of a Lake Pasquaney that Crowley was staying at, which happens to be the older name of a lake, Newfound Lake.
Yeah, I think so.
Off Interstate 93.
A lot of people confuse it with Lake Winnipesaukee, but actually it's a lake over a little bit further from that. And we have another source book, and maybe we can show a little bit about it. We have another source book that kind of corroborates Brandon talking about the tablet and the relic on top of Mount Shaw. They too say, interestingly enough, that it's in an area that there was a massive fire, forest fire, whatever it was, caused by something. Burned everything to the ground, and then a whole bunch of overgrowth has now kind of claimed the area, the table. So it'll be interesting to see if we can actually find it.
Yeah, hold on. Let me check to see that we're recording. So we're starting down here in Providence this weekend. Just basically putting together our research as we tackle Interstate 93, which is its own barrel of worms, monkeys, etc. Worm monkeys. And that will be next weekend, and I am afraid we're about to get ejected from this graveyard, so out.
Nice.
So here's another fun fact about Quincy and all this stuff is that Quincy's at the base of 93. Guess where the Betty and Barney Hill abduction story broke? Because it was quiet for a long time.
The Broken Quincy?
Broken Quincy. They came down to the UFO. There was a UFO society in Quincy, and they came down here and broke the story here.
Who did? Betty and Barney Hill?
Betty and Barney Hill.